Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Colin and this is the review for the Fosi Audio ZH3, Fosi's new DAC headphone amp. You might be here because you want to know the problem I was referring to with the ZH3. It's not clickbait. I'll talk about that in the headphone amp section of the review. But let me talk about my experience with the ZH3 first. I've been using the ZH3 as a DAC on my stereo system and using it with headphones for a couple of weeks now. And before the ZH3, I was actually using the ZD3, Fosi's standalone DAC. So I'll be referring back to the ZD3 and comparing the two in this video as well. Now let's take a look at the ZH3. It features an AKM4493 SCQ DAC chip inside. If you're familiar with DAC chips, the AKM chips do tend to sound different than the ESS chips that the ZD3 has, but more on that later. The ZH3 has two output ports on the front panel, 1/4 inch jack and a 4.4mm balanced jack. It's capable of outputting 640 mW single-ended and 2.5 watts balanced with a 32 ohm load. So that should be enough for 99% headphones on the market. We have one pair of XLR outputs and a pair of RCA outputs. For analog inputs, unlike the ZD3, the ZH3 has one set of RCA analog inputs, so you can link up your phono amp or CD player etc. and either amplify through the headphone amp or output it through the analog outs using the preamp functionality of the ZH3. Now regarding digital inputs, there's optical in, coaxial, and USB. There's no Bluetooth or HDMI ARC in on the ZH3. Then there's the 12V triggers where you can turn on the ZA3 or other 12V trigger devices with. Last, the ZH3 features a 12V DC input, same as the ZD3. But the power supply is different as the ZH3 requires a switching power supply with a larger output. So this is the ZD3 power supply. And this is the ZH3 power supply. Let's talk about the user interface. This is the part that I am most surprised with. Fosi engineers really listened to their users and made a lot of quality of life upgrades to the UI when compared to the ZD3. Despite the two devices looking very similar, the user interface of the ZH3 is much more well thought out and mature. Let's take a look at its menu system. Click the orange knob once and it will get you into the menu. There are basically two pages in the menu system. On the first page, you can choose your input and outputs. There's also tone controls, but it's only available in headphone amplifier mode. For outputs, there's phone out, aux out, and line out. On line out, the ZD3 fixes the line out voltage at 2 and 4 volts and locks the volume at 99. Tone controls, gain, UAC functionality are disabled in line out or aux out mode. So let's change back to headphone amp mode. For tone controls, you can set it in a range of -12 dB to +12 dB for the bass, and -10 dB to +10 dB for the treble. For the gain, there are 3 gain levels: low, medium, and high. UAC allows you to set the device to USB 1 to use with the Nintendo Switch or other consoles. And then there's bypass that lets you bypass your preset tone settings. Last, we have a series of digital filters you can choose from. In this case, I think that the filters actually make a difference. My favorite filters are the natural, smooth, and well-defined filters. Although I don't think it sounds like how it's described, the technical names of these descriptive names are listed in the user manual. Additionally, my favorite feature upgrade from the ZH3 is the screen brightness and the timeout options. You can set the screen brightness or a screen timeout of 2 minutes. which is a quality of life improvement from the ZD3. I don't like having the screen on all the time, and on the ZD3, you need to manually turn the screen off every time you adjust the volume or a setting, which I think is very annoying. Another feature that the ZD3 doesn't have is the auto power off feature, where the device automatically turns itself off after 30 minutes without any signal input. I think the menu is much more user-friendly on the ZH3, as all you could really do on the ZD3 was basically volume control and input selection. I really appreciate the effort here. So I have actually compared the sound of the ZH3 to the ZD3 through my stereo system. Though the differences aren't huge, it's definitely noticeable. The first thing I noticed between the two is the soundstage. The ZD3 tends to have a more expansive soundstage that expands beyond the left and right speakers, while the ZH3, things tend to happen within the boundary of the two speakers. But center imaging though, there is a better focus and center imaging when the vocals kick in on the ZH3. There's a slight difference in tonality as well. It aligns with how different people perceive the ESS and AKM decks. I find the ZD3 to have more upper mid-range sparkle, like in acoustic guitar plucks, but the bass felt less impactful than the ZH3. On the ZH3, the mids have slightly more body, and the mid-bass felt a little more impactful. Again, not a huge difference, but it's the difference I heard when I compared the two decks on my system. The headphone amplifier section sounds transparent and uncolored, so it basically sounds like how I heard it in my stereo system, but with headphones. First, I tested the noise floor with sensitive IEMs, both in the balanced and single-ended output. I found out that there is an audible background hiss when the tone control bypass is off. The hiss gets louder with higher gain levels, and is quite noticeable. However, when bypass is turned on, the hiss goes away. Here's a recording demonstrating the hiss issue. I recorded the IEMs with a mic. The hiss goes away immediately with bypass turned on. So my recommendation is to not use tone controls when using IEMs. To really put the power output of the ZH3 to the test, I tried driving my Fostex T60RP with it, which is notoriously known to be difficult to drive. Not just that, I cranked the bass boost to plus 12 decibels to see if the ZH3 will cut out and distort. Plugging the T60 in the single-ended output and cranking the volume to maximum, I was able to hear audible distortion in the bass, but it's honestly much louder than what I would listen to when it distorts. Using the balanced output, I was never able to hear any distortion, even at max volume and with tone controls on. But of course, I didn't place the headphones directly on my head, or I would go deaf. So as long as you use balanced output for any hard-to-drive headphones, I think the ZH3 does have a very capable and powerful amp section. In summary, after all the testing with the ZH3, I will recommend the ZH3 for those looking for a headphone DAC plus amp. It's very capable for the price, and the user experience is well thought out. The only issue there would be is the hiss with tone controls on. If you don't use tone controls at all, this wouldn't be an issue for you. Some may want to know whether to get the ZD3 or the ZH3. To me, I think that question depends on how you're going to use it and the functionality. If you need HDMI ARC-in or Bluetooth, the ZD3 is a no-brainer. And if you need a headphone amp, it's definitely the ZH3. ZH3 gives you a more mature and better thought out UI, and also gives you filter sections in DAC mode. There's a slight difference in sound quality, but I think the functionality is a bigger factor when choosing a DAC at this price point. So this is the end of the video. The biggest surprise for me on the ZH3 is how much the interface improved coming from the ZD3. I'm really interested to see if Fosi will come up with a DAC with a higher end DAC chip. Let me know if you have any questions about the ZH3 in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you found this review useful.